The prison yard was loud that afternoon. Metal weights slammed against rusted bars. Inmates shouted across cracked concrete. A siren echoed somewhere in the distance, followed by laughter that didn't sound friendly. It was just another day inside maximum security. And then there was him, an older man sitting alone on a bench near the fence line. No tattoos, no gang colors, no desperate need to prove himself. Just calm, his hair slightly gray, posture straight, hands resting loosely on his knees like he was waiting for a bus, not surviving prison. A few inmates noticed. Who's grandpa? He lost. Wrong retirement home, old man. Some laughed, others stared. But the strange thing wasn't that he was quiet. It was that he didn't look afraid. Not tense, not alert, not scanning for threats. Just steady. In a place where fear was currency, he had none on display. And that made him stand out more than any gang leader ever could. From one corner of the yard, a heavily tattooed inmate watched him closely. 6'3", muscles layered over old scars. A man whose reputation traveled faster than he did. He didn't like what he was seeing. Because predators understand one thing. If someone isn't afraid, there's usually a reason. The older man slowly stood up as the yard bell rang, and in that moment, the big inmate started walking toward him. No rush, no hesitation, just intention. 30 seconds from now, this entire yard would fall silent, because someone was about to test the wrong man, and they had no idea who he really was. The yard bell had barely stopped echoing when the big inmate reached him. Up close, the size difference was obvious. The tattooed man looked like he had been carved out of concrete. Thick arms, shaved head, cold eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. Other inmates subtly moved out of his path. No one interfered when he walked toward someone, especially not someone new. The older man turned slightly as the shadow fell over him. He didn't step back. He didn't brace. He simply looked up. The big inmate bumped into him hard. Not an accident. A deliberate shoulder slam meant to test balance, pride, reaction. Most men would stumble, he didn't. He shifted half a step, absorbing the impact like water bending around a rock. Watch it, old man. The inmate snapped. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Nearby conversation started fading. Heads turned subtly. In prison, conflict was better than television. The older man met his eyes. Calm. Measured. My mistake. The words were quiet. Controlled, no sarcasm. No fear. That should have ended it. But men like this didn't look for apologies. They looked for dominance. The big inmate leaned closer, invading his space. You think I'm stupid? He asked. Silence. The older man's breathing didn't change. No clenched fists. No raised shoulders, just steady eye contact. And that irritated the inmate more than any insult could have. Because he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. No trembling. No stuttering. No submission. Around them, inmates formed a loose circle without making it obvious. A few leaned against the fence. Others pretended to keep lifting weights, while watching from the corner of their eyes. 2 guards in the tower shifted position slightly, paying attention but not yet moving. In here, fights were common, but this felt different. The big inmate shoved him in the chest. Harder this time. The kind of shove meant to drop someone backward. Again, nothing. The older man rocked slightly, then recentered. Perfect balance. That caught attention. Even the bully noticed it. He narrowed his eyes. Stand straight when I talk to you. The older man was already standing straight, but he adjusted his posture slightly anyway. Not submissive, not challenging, neutral. That neutrality was dangerous. You don't talk much, huh? The inmate sneered. Still nothing, just calm breathing. The big inmate circled him once, sizing him up. You new here? Yes. Simple answer. Got a name. Another pause. Steven. The name meant nothing to most of the yard. And that was fine. The inmate smirked. Steven, he repeated mockingly. You look soft, Steven. A few prisoners chuckled. Maybe you need a lesson. First week rule. The older man tilted his head slightly.
I don't want problems. There it was.
Not fear. Not begging. A statement. And something about the way he said it felt less like weakness, and more like a warning. The big inmate felt it too. But ego doesn't allow retreat in front of an audience. He stepped closer until they were nearly chest to chest. You don't get to want things in here. The yard was quiet now. Even the clanking weights had stopped. The air felt heavier. The older man slowly raised his eyes to meet the inmates again. There was no anger in them, no challenge, just assessment, like he was measuring distance, timing, intent, and that subtle shift, that almost invisible calculation, made one of the watching inmates whisper under his breath, "Something's off." The big inmate didn't notice. He grabbed the collar of Steven's prison shirt and twisted it in his fist. You think staying quiet makes you tough. Steven's hands remained at his sides. Relaxed, not even clenched. I'm trying to give you a chance, he said calmly. The bully blinked. A chance. For you to walk away? The words weren't loud, but they landed. A few inmates exchanged glances. Who talks like that in prison? The big inmate barked out a laugh, but it wasn't fully confident anymore. You giving me a chance? He mocked. He shoved him again. Harder. Steven took a small step back this time. Not because he lost balance, because he chose to create space. That detail went unnoticed by most, but not all. In the guard tower, one officer leaned forward, squinting slightly. He had seen controlled movement before. Military. Professional fighters. This wasn't random. This wasn't fear. The big inmate cracked his neck from side to side. You know what happens when someone disrespects me in this yard? Steven didn't answer. The bully leaned in close, voice low now. I make sure they don't stand up again. A long pause. Wind brushed across the concrete. Steven exhaled slowly. I don't want to hurt you. That was it, that sentence. That calm, almost regretful tone. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a fact. The circle tightened slightly. Because now everyone felt it. This wasn't going to end like a normal prison scuffle. The bully's jaw tightened. His pride was on the line, and pride inside prison is more dangerous than weapons. He released Steven's collar, only to raise his hand slowly, not yet striking, just hovering, testing, watching for flinch. There wasn't one. Not even a blink. That's when frustration turned into decision, and decision turned into action. The inmate's expression changed. The point of no return was seconds away, and everyone in that yard felt it coming. The inmate's raised hand hovered in the air for a second, not striking yet, waiting, testing for fear. In prison, flinching is weakness. Weakness spreads like blood in water. Steven didn't flinch. Not a blink, not a tightened jaw, not a defensive stance, just steady breathing. The bully lowered his hand slightly, confused. Most men at least brace for impact. This one looked like he was waiting for something else entirely. You think you're different? The inmate growled. No answer. That silence was beginning to feel insulting. The circle around them tightened another step. Inmates sensed something important was happening. This wasn't loud chaos. This was controlled tension, the kind that explodes fast. You deaf? The bully snapped. Steven's voice remained level. I hear you. Then react. A pause. I am. That response landed heavier than a punch. Because he wasn't reacting emotionally. He was reacting strategically. The bully's breathing grew louder, faster. Predators rely on intimidation. When intimidation fails, they escalate. He shoved Steven again, harder than before. This time, a full two-handed push meant to knock him down. Steven's feet shifted smoothly across the concrete, sliding instead of stumbling. Balance maintained. Controlled. Several inmates exchanged looks now. One whispered, he's trained. Another shook his head. No way, not that old. The bully noticed the murmurs, and humiliation began creeping into his chest. That's dangerous. Embarrassed men in prison don't retreat. They explode. He stepped closer again, chest puffed out. You think you're smarter than me? No. You think you're stronger? No. The answers were simple, honest, which somehow made them worst, because there was no ego to attack, no pride to crush, just calm, and calm in chaos is power. The bully grabbed Steven by the shirt again, tighter this time. Knuckles white. You know what I do to guys who don't show respect? Steven met his eyes once more. You're confusing fear with respect. The yard went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. That sentence hit the bully deeper than anything physical could. Fear with respect. In this place, they were treated as the same thing. He wasn't used to someone separating them. His jaw tightened. His grip twisted harder. You think you're teaching me something? Steven's voice didn't change. No, I'm warning you. That did it? A murmur rolled through the watching inmates. Warning him. Who warns a man like that inside prison? The bully's face flushed red. This had gone too far now. Too many eyes watching, too many whispers. His reputation demanded action. He released Steven's shirt suddenly, only to step back half a pace. Space to swing, space to strike. The signal was clear. A fight was about to happen. Two guards in the tower grabbed their radios but didn't call it in yet. They were watching body language. And something about the older man's posture didn't match a victim's. Steven slightly adjusted his stance, subtle, barely noticeable, feet angled, weight centered, hands still low, not raised in defense, not clenched, relaxed. That detail mattered. Real fighters don't telegraph readiness. They reduce movement. The bully saw none of this. All he saw was an older man who refused to submit. Last chance, the inmate said. Steven exhaled slowly. Walk away. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it was final. A boundary. The bully laughed again, louder this time, forcing confidence back into his voice. You're in my yard. He suddenly stepped forward and shoved Steven one more time, the hardest yet. This time, Steven allowed himself to take 3 small backward steps. Not stumbling, flowing, creating space. That's when a few experienced inmates understood he wasn't absorbing punishment. He was positioning. The bully charged forward again, ready to strike. But before he threw a punch, he did something worse. Something that would make retreat impossible. He spat at Steven's feet. A collective reaction rippled through the circle. That wasn't just aggression. That was public humiliation. Steven looked down at the concrete for half a second, then back up, still calm. But something had shifted. Not anger. Not rage. Decision. The bully mistook it for weakness. He smirked. You gonna cry? Steven spoke one last time before everything changed. I asked you to stop. No raised voice. No threat. Just truth. And that's when the bully crossed the line he could never uncross. His arm pulled back. Full force. No hesitation now. The slap came fast, hard. The crack echoed across the yard like a gunshot. Steven's head turned slightly with the impact. Gasps broke the silence. Inmates leaned forward. Guards tensed. The bully smiled. He thought he'd won. For 1 second. He believed dominance had been established. But when Steven slowly turned his head back to center, there was no anger in his eyes, no humiliation, no fear, just clarity. And in that moment, every instinct in the yard screamed the same warning. The wrong man had just been touched. 30 seconds. That's all it was going to take. And the bully had no idea what was about to happen. The sound of the slap still echoed when Steven slowly turned his head back forward. The bully was smiling. He expected rage, or embarrassment, or retaliation. Steven inhaled once, exhaled slowly, and in that exhale something changed, not in his face, in his posture, his spine aligned, his weight settled. His eyes sharpened. The bully saw it, but too late. You done? The inmate mocked. Steven didn't answer. The bully stepped forward and threw a wild right hook. Fast, heavy, angry. Steven moved less than an inch. He shifted slightly off the line of attack. The punch sliced through empty air. Before the bully could recover, Steven's left hand caught his wrist. Not violently, precisely. A twist, a pivot of the hips. Suddenly the bully's momentum betrayed him. His arm bent at an unnatural angle. A sharp gasp escaped his mouth. Confusion hit before pain did. Steven stepped closer, not away. Control distance. Control leverage. His right hand pressed lightly against the inmate's elbow joint. Pressure, not force. Just alignment. The bully tried to yank his arm free. He couldn't. The more he pulled, the tighter the lock became. The yard fell silent. This didn't look like a brawl. It looked like a demonstration. The bully swung with his free hand. Steven rotated. A small shoulder shift. The second punch missed completely. And with a simple redirection of weight, the massive inmate crashed to his knees. Concrete scraped skin. A collective gasp spread across the yard. No one understood how it happened. 1 second he was standing. The next he was kneeling, controlled. Trapped, Steven maintained the joint lock effortlessly. Not shaking, balanced. Stop, Steven said calmly. The bully snarled and tried to rise. Big mistake. Steven adjusted the angle slightly. A controlled torque through the elbow and shoulder. Pain shot through the inmate's arm. A sharp cry escaped his throat before he could stop it. Humiliation flooded his face. The circle of inmates widened. No one stepped forward, because now they understood. This wasn't luck. This wasn't adrenaline. This was training, years of it. The bully planted his foot and tried to power upward. Raw strength. Steven stepped behind him, shifted his center of gravity, and guided him down face first onto the concrete, not slammed, placed. But the effect was devastating. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Before he could roll, Steven pinned his wrist to the ground, knee placed precisely near the shoulder blade, body weight distributed perfectly, maximum control, minimum effort. The entire exchange had taken less than 10 seconds. No wild punches, no shouting, no chaos, just precision. The bully thrashed, tried to twist, tried to overpower. Nothing worked. Every movement he made only tightened the control. Steven leaned slightly closer. I told you to walk away. Not angry, not loud. The bully's breathing became frantic. Fear replaced rage. Because for the first time since entering this prison, he had no control. Around them, inmates stared in disbelief. Some looked at each other silently. Respect shifts fast in prison, and they had just witnessed a transfer of power. The bully made one last desperate attempt. He pushed off the concrete with his free hand. Steven anticipated it. He released the wrist suddenly. only to transition instantly into a shoulder compression hold. Fluid. Efficient. The inmate's body rotated helplessly, and he was face down again, this time unable to move at all. Steven didn't strike him, didn't break anything. He didn't need to. Dominance was already established. In the guard tower, one officer finally grabbed his radio. Yard control. But even as guards began approaching, they slowed down, because the situation wasn't escalating. It was contained by the older man. The bully's voice cracked.
Get off me!
Steven eased pressure slightly, just enough for him to speak clearly. Are you finished? Silence, breathing, concrete scraping. Then finally, a strained whisper. Yeah. The yard absorbed that word like a shockwave.
Yeah.
Submission. Steven slowly released the hold, but he didn't step back immediately. He waited, giving the inmate space to stand on his own. The bully pushed himself up shakily, avoiding eye contact now, arm hanging awkwardly but not broken. Steven stepped back one pace, hands relaxed again at his sides, same posture as before. Calm, the guards arrived fully now. Step away. Steven complied instantly, no resistance, no attitude. The bully didn't speak, didn't look up. The circle of inmates dissolved quickly, but the silence remained, because something irreversible had happened. In less than 30 seconds, a man feared by the yard had been dismantled, without brutality, without rage, without spectacle, just skill and control. As guards escorted them apart, whispers spread like electricity. Who is he? Where'd he learn that? That wasn't street fighting.
No, it wasn't.
It was discipline. And the most dangerous thing in prison isn't violence. It's controlled violence. Steven returned to the bench, sat down. Same posture, same calm, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. From that moment on, no one in that yard would mistake him for weak again. The yard never returned to normal that day, even after the guards pulled back, even after the circle dissolved. Something invisible had shifted. Steven sat back down on the same bench, same posture, same calm, like the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. But across the yard, conversations were different now. Lower voices, side glances measured distance. The bully, the man who had controlled that section for months, stood near the water fountain, flexing his arms slowly. It wasn't broken. That made it worse. Because everyone knew, if the older man wanted to break it, he could have. And that realization spread faster than fear. It spread as respect. Two inmates approached cautiously, not aggressively, just curious. One of them nodded slightly. You military? Steven looked up briefly. No. Law enforcement? No. The men exchanged a look. Steven paused. Control. That was it. No bragging. No backstory. Just one word. The inmates walked away quietly. Across the yard, the former bully avoided eye contact with anyone who looked at him. His dominance had evaporated, not because he lost a fight, but because he lost it cleanly. No cheap shots, no gang interference, no luck, just skill. And in prison, clean losses change everything. Later that afternoon, during meal line, space opened around Steven automatically. Not exaggerated, not theatrical, just enough. An unspoken perimeter. Some inmates nodded respectfully as they passed. He returned the nods, nothing more. One younger prisoner, nervous, unsure, finally spoke up while standing behind him in line. How long you train? Steven didn't turn around. A lifetime. That's some kind of karate? Aikido. The word meant nothing to most around them, but the way he said it carried weight, controlled, balanced, intentional. The younger inmate swallowed. You could have really hurt him. Steven picked up his tray calmly.
Yes. Why didn't you?
A brief pause. Because I didn't need to. That answer settled deep, in a place built on proving strength. Restraint becomes terrifying. Later that evening, back in the housing block, whispers traveled cell to cell. They say he didn't even throw a punch. He moved like it was nothing. Big Mike couldn't even stand up. The story grew, but not exaggerated, because everyone who saw it knew it didn't need exaggeration. The former bully sat alone on his bunk, arm sore, ego shattered. But something else had replaced his anger, awareness. He replayed the moment in his head. The balance, the calm, the way his own force had been turned against him. He realized something uncomfortable. He had never been in control. He had been reacting. Steven had been deciding. That difference changes men. Lights out approached. The housing unit dimmed. Metal doors echoed shut. In the quiet of his cell, Steven sat cross-legged on the lower bunk, eyes closed, breathing steady, no celebration, no adrenaline crash, just stillness. Across the corridor, another inmate watched through the bars. You some kind of master or something? He asked quietly. Steven opened his eyes slightly. No. Then what are you? A long pause. Disciplined. That word carried more weight than master ever could. Because discipline isn't about fighting. It's about choosing when not to. The inmate nodded slowly, and that was the moment it became clear. The real danger wasn't the techniques. It wasn't the speed. It wasn't the strength. It was the restraint. The knowledge that he could end someone, but chose not to. In prison, fear controls people, but controlled power commands them. By the next morning, no one laughed when he walked into the yard. No one tested him. No one needed to. Because the lesson had already been delivered, and the most powerful part. He never asked for respect. He earned it in silence. The next morning, the prison yard was different. Not louder, not wilder, just heavier. Inmates moved with more care. Conversations softened. Even guards noticed the shift in energy. Word spread quickly. One inmate whispered to another, "Did you see him yesterday?" "Yeah, Big Mike couldn't even move. Nobody touches him again. That's impossible." But everyone knew the truth. Nothing impossible about it. Just skill, control, and discipline, elements most people never mastered. By midday, the prison warden had received multiple reports. The incident was unusual enough to require official attention. Not because Steven had injured anyone. Not because of chaos. Because the calm authority he radiated disrupted the balance of power. Inside the administrative office, the warden sat across from two senior guards. "Who is this guy?" he asked. "Not our typical inmate," one replied. "He's disciplined. Skilled. Everyone is keeping distance. Big Mike looks like he just got schooled by a ghost." The warden leaned back. A faint smirk touched his lips. "I need to know more. Check his file. Background. Everything." Meanwhile, back in the yard, Steven remained calm. Sitting on a bench, he observed quietly. Nothing had changed outwardly. But inwardly, he was calculating. Not with anger. Not with ego, just awareness. Later, a group of guards approached, led by a man in a crisp uniform. His presence commanded respect, military posture, sharp eyes, careful movements. "Seagal?" the man asked. Steven looked up slowly.
"That's me."
"You're to come with us." Confusion rippled through the yard. Guards, inmates, even Big Mike looked on. "You're being transferred?" The officer continued. "Special assignment clearance required. You need to speak with the director." Steven nodded. No reaction. Calm as ever. He walked past the former bully. Big Mike's eyes followed him, filled with disbelief and something that looked like understanding. Respect. In the administrative wing, Steven was escorted into a secure office. Inside sat a man in a black suit, sharp features, and a presence that immediately set the tone. "Steven," the man began, voice steady but commanding. "I've watched the footage from yesterday. Your restraint, your technique, it's remarkable. And the control you displayed over that situation prevented a major incident in the yard." Steven nodded. "You didn't know it, but yesterday, you demonstrated exactly the kind of discipline we value. Our organization could use someone with your skills." The words hung in the air. Steven's calm gaze didn't shift. He didn't smile. He simply listened. The man continued. "We have a program working with high-risk operations, crisis management, situations where precise control is essential." It hit Steven quietly. No shock. No egotoshin. In the prison yard, the ripple effect had only grown. Inmates now whispered. "He's not just skilled. He's untouchable. Someone like him doesn't belong here." Big Mike leaned against the fence quietly, rubbing his shoulder. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The lesson had been delivered. Control over chaos isn't just physical. It's psychological, strategic, and it had consequences. Outside the observation window, the former bully was escorted away for a medical check. Minor injuries, bruised ego, pride shattered. He would recover physically, mentally. That would take far longer. Steven's calm had done more than stop a fight. It had rewritten the social hierarchy of the yard in less than a minute. By the time he walked out with the special escort, whispers had turned into stunned silence. Guards nodded respectfully. Inmates stared. Everyone understood power isn't always loud. As he passed the former bully one last time, Big Mike looked up, eyes wide. He didn't say a word, just a subtle nod, acknowledgement of what he'd just witnessed. Steven's composure never wavered. Every step measured, precise, controlled. And in that moment, everyone, from guards to inmates, realized something fundamental. You don't need to hurt people to establish dominance. You need awareness, precision, and the ability to choose. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about chaos. It was about control. And that's when the yard, the prison, and everyone inside it truly understood who they had underestimated. Because sometimes the quietest men make the loudest impact. And sometimes, respect isn't given. It's earned, in silence with every calculated move, and in every measured breath. Steven walked past the last of the onlookers. His eyes never lingered. His mind never raced. He had already moved on, but the consequences of his presence would linger in that prison long after he left. And that lesson, one that would be remembered, not because it was violent, but because it was controlled, inevitable, and undeniable. The wrong man had been tested, and he had failed. The right man, calm, quiet, precise, had won, without striking unnecessarily, without chaos, simply by being Steven Seagal. The yard was quiet for the first time in weeks, not silent like a lull before chaos, silent like respect had finally settled. Steven Seagal sat on the same bench where it all started, hands resting calmly on his knees, posture straight, eyes scanning the yard with quiet awareness. Not a flicker of arrogance, not a hint of anger, just presence. Inmates kept their distance, they weren't scared. They were cautious, a subtle recognition that this man's control was different. Rare, dangerous in a way that didn't need to be violent. Big Mike, the once dominant inmate who had been humiliated, now leaned against the fence at a distance. He didn't meet Steven's eyes. His pride had been shattered, but more than that, he had learned something vital. A lesson he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about strength, it was about restraint. Across the yard, whispers carried. That's power. You can't touch him unless he lets you. Discipline like that, it's impossible to fake. Steven watched without reacting. He didn't crave validation. He didn't need to be feared. That wasn't his goal. He had demonstrated something far more enduring, that control is more powerful than aggression, and respect earned silently lasts longer than fear imposed loudly. Later, during the evening lockdown, inmates returned to their cells. Conversations were softer, movements more careful. Even guards exchanged quiet nods of understanding. The ripple effect of Steven's presence was subtle but profound. A single man's quiet composure had rewritten the yard's social hierarchy. Big Mike sat on his bunk alone. He replayed the incident over and over, feeling the weight of his failure. Not physical but psychological. He hadn't been beaten by strength. He had been outmatched by calm, precision, and judgment. Steven didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing evenly, allowing the calm to settle deep within him. This was the true measure of mastery, the ability to confront aggression and choose not to destroy, while still asserting authority. A younger inmate approached, hesitating at the doorway. He whispered, You could have crushed him." Steven opened his eyes slowly, voice quiet but firm. "Yes, I chose not to." The words landed heavier than any punch. "You chose?" The young inmate repeated, eyes wide. "Yes, I chose control over chaos, discipline over anger, humanity over vengeance." The younger inmate nodded, taking the lesson silently. He didn't need to say more. He understood. In the hallway, guards discussed the events. "That guy, he doesn't belong here," one said.
"Yeah,"
replied another.
"But he's changed the way everyone thinks. No one dares mess with him now, and they won't." Back in the yard, Steven watched the sun set over the concrete walls. Shadows stretched long across the yard, but no threat stirred. Not a single inmate moved aggressively. Not because they were afraid, because they had learned. He stood, stretched lightly, and addressed the silent crowd with words that carried quietly but firmly. Respect should never depend on who someone is. Strength should never be proven through fear or chaos. It should be shown through controlled discipline, and the choices you make under pressure. A few inmates nodded. Others remained silent, absorbing the lesson. Because in that moment, they realized real power isn't loud. Real power is deliberate. The former bully, sitting alone, stared at the ground. For the first time, he understood a deeper truth: intimidation is temporary. Respect earned through discipline lasts far longer. And losing to someone who doesn't need to fight leaves a lasting impact. Steven didn't seek revenge. He didn't show off. He simply existed as an example, calm, steady, unshakable. A living demonstration that mastery is measured not by brute force, but by control of self and situation. By the time the lights in the housing block dimmed, Steven had returned to his bunk. He lay quietly, meditative. The yard, the inmates, even the guards, all carried the imprint of what had happened. A single man's quiet authority had changed an entire environment. And the most important lesson lingered. You don't need to prove yourself to everyone. You only need to control yourself. When you control yourself, chaos respects you. Fear becomes irrelevant. Respect becomes inevitable. The next morning, whispers began again in the yard, softer now, respectful. Inmates passed without confrontation. Big Mike kept his distance. Others nodded subtly. The story of the calm, Older man who had refused to be provoked had become legend. Steven rose from his bunk one last time before the day's routine began. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't seek attention. He simply moved with purpose, his presence alone conveying authority. A new inmate, watching from the corner of the yard, whispered to his friend, "Who is that?" The friend shook his head. "No one messes with him. Ever. If you believe respect should be given to everyone. Not because they're strong, not because they demand it, but because they're human. Comment respect. Because the real strength isn't in striking first. It's in knowing you don't have to."